Margot, I want to ask, though, you mentioned about judges a moment ago, and I note that in the lawsuit over this whole controversy over the Signal chat group, well, the same judge is involved with this who also recently ordered a stay on the deportation of Venezuelan gangbangers. Now, is this just a coincidence?
Oh, absolutely. So, in addition to the other background that you provided for me, I worked for 25 years for a federal appellate judge. So, I'm very familiar with how judges are appointed to, designated to cases. And in that case, it's a random assignment. And it is really unfortunate that there's this kind of conspiracy stuff that's going on. The judge actually, at the beginning of the hearing on the Signal matter today, actually explained how the assignments happened in his courtroom. And while it's unfortunate, it's understandable because we are seeing the lawfare carried forward. And when the judges are entering such outrageous restraining orders, it makes the public suspicious of how are these cases getting to these judges that are making these rulings against Trump? So I don't think there's any reason of concern, but I understand why people who aren't familiar with it will respond that way.
Yeah, no, that's good to hear. But I also want to ask about another one of the big cases here, and obviously that's the one around the Trump administration's attempt to dismantle the USAID program, where we have seen so many scandalous things having money spent on them. Tell us about this, because I understand there's recently been a bit more action on this case. How is that proceeding?
So there are actually several different cases going on where they've been challenging the USAID, where they've been canceling the different grants, et cetera. So we have one case where the court said, basically, you can't cancel these grants. The Trump administration tried to have that injunction stayed, and the appellate court, I think it was just yesterday, said, no, we're not going to stay that injunction. It's absolutely clear what you can and can't do. It wasn't absolutely clear because the judge said, well, you can't do it under this guidance or anything that is based on that guidance. So that was a really poor decision, but I would expect that to go to the Supreme Court. On the other hand, we had a case where Musk and an individual who, Marco Rubio, so Senate confirmed Secretary of State, who is also currently the acting head of USAID, he appointed an individual to be the chief operating officer and the deputy administrator of USAID. And a federal court actually said, no, you can't have anything to do with it because you actually worked with the DOGE team. That case has actually been stayed by the appellate court. So I have a feeling that that is going to be thrown out because the injunction it's frankly crazy that a judge would think that they could tell who the president and his cabinet can allow to run different agencies.
Well, and at the heart of it, though, Margot, what's going to happen here is this must be about who the president is allowed to appoint, what he's allowed to tell them to do. This is all set out in Article 2 of the Constitution. Do all of these cases go individually to the Supreme Court, or will the Supreme Court at some point just be asked to rule and say, look, the president has this authority and he can do X, Y, and Z?
It's actually going to be somewhere in the middle. So I've been actually discussing cases in buckets. So in this bucket is the case about who they can appoint, the special counsel, the head of the Merit Safety Board or Protection Board. That's going to be one set of cases. There's going to be another case probably about USAID. There's going to be another case about birthright. But each case, when the Supreme Court takes it, is going to involve many different issues. So once the Supreme Court resolves one issue and establishes precedent throughout the country, that will bind the lower courts where that exact same issue is in play. And one specific area you want to look at is something called the Administrative Procedures Act. That has been what most of these lawsuits have been based on. And in most cases, the lawsuits are manipulating and abusing that statute. It's not meant to challenge these probationary employees being fired or the canceling of grants. And there's actually other courts that are designed and have jurisdiction over that. So you're going to see the Supreme Court probably wade into about a half a different cases, but over a very long time period. And that is going to end this kind of whack-a-mole that's going on with these injunctions, and then the appellate court slapping them down, and then another court entering an injunction.